My name is Brian Nicholas, and this presentation is part of a natural resource ecology course at Washington State University. In this video, we will be exploring a deep analysis of Kamiak Butte, from its geologic foundation, its climatic patterns, and its overall physical features. Kamiak Butte lies about 14 miles away from campus here at Washington State. The butte does not bear the same Palouse features that we see all around us, like rolling hills and wheat fields. It sticks out like a sore thumb and harbors much more biodiversity than the land around it. It was once part of an old mountain range that is now buried under many years of natural processes that make it what it is today. Kamiak Butte serves as a symbol of what the land was long ago and can be studied to give us a deeper understanding of how our environment works. The goal of this presentation is to not only answer questions as to why this specific feature arose, but to develop a deeper understanding of the interconnections that form our environment. Questions like, why is this specific feature so different than the rest of the landscape? Why is there different plant life on one side of the butte compared to the other? What processes combine together to ultimately form the greater Palouse region in eastern Washington? All of these questions and more can be answered by taking a look back at the region's history and drawing conclusions on what might have led to the formation of this feature. The first domino of the Butte's formation fell around 100 million years ago, when the Pacific Oceanic Plate started subducting under the North American continental plate. This caused rapid land changes inland on the continental plate, forming the now Cascade Mountain Range. This also led to a general increase in volcanic activity on the west coast. Now eastern Washington had a new barrier separating the oceanic weather moving east off of the Pacific Ocean, drastically affecting the climate norm in the area. Storms and weather systems that once moved inland freely would now be stopped by the Cascade Range, drastically decreasing the amount of rainfall that made it across the state. Additionally, this volcanic activity eventually led to the formation of the Columbia River flood basalts leaking into eastern Washington. This basalt then created the foundation from which the Palouse region would evolve. During the last deglaciation that followed the end of the last glacial maximum, the Cordilleran ice sheet covered much of northern Washington and Idaho. This glacier started to retreat as temperatures rose, causing water to flow back towards the Pacific Ocean. As this was happening, ice melt began pooling up in what would be known as Glacial Lake Missoula. This ice dam was eventually overwhelmed with the water's pressure and released a massive amount at once, causing all the topsoil lying on the basalt to be pushed out of eastern Washington and towards the ocean. This removal of mediocre topsoil was beneficial in the long run. During these glacial flooding events, the climate began to disperse newly uncovered and compiled soils across eastern Washington. This lowest soil, as it's called, proved to be essential for crop growth as it is one of the most nutrient-rich and efficient soils in the agricultural industry. The Palouse later exploded agriculturally, coming to be one of the most productive farmlands around the world. The butte lies in the western hemisphere, between the equator and the North Pole, but near neither. It experiences a moderate climate throughout the year, with high and low ends in summer and winter due to the Cascade Mountain Range as mentioned earlier. The climate in eastern Washington is not as marine modified as the west coast is. This is due to the topography of western Washington influencing the climate patterns and causing rain to fall before crossing the Cascades. Rainfall in eastern Washington comes to around 20 inches a year, while its westerly counterpart enjoys around 65 inches annually. Though the butte lacks the rainfall that the western part of the state has, the biome there still heavily supports plant life. It is classified as a western interior shrubland and woodland, and harbors plant species like hawthorn, serviceberry, mock orange, and wild roses. The butte itself harbors many diverse plant species. The ridge tops are the drier sites on the Palouse and are populated by ponderosa pines, snowberry shrubs, and glacier lilies. At first glance, the butte seems oddly bare on one side and highly populated with plant life on the other. This is due to prevailing winds and solar radiation levels received on either side of the butte. The south side harbors dense vegetation. Tree species like Douglas fir, western larch, and ponderosa pine form the canopy. There is higher competition for sunlight and soil due to plant life being so abundant, both in the canopy and in the underbrush. Animal species include whitetail, hawks, squirrels, rabbits, and more. The north side, however, has open patches of bunchgrass, with the occasional ponderosa pine standing tall. Since there is close to no canopy coverage compared to the north side, water is easily absorbed into the dry soil. The booming agriculture in the greater Palouse region has taken its toll on the native plant species and environment. The repeated tilling and removal of native plant species to make room for farmable crops has drastically affected this ecosystem, even though it has been a gold mine economically. Tilling, pesticide runoff, native species removal, and mass production have all impacted the environmental diversity of the Palouse and is what makes Kamiak Butte stick out like a sore thumb in the landscape of eastern Washington. Carbon sequestration can be analyzed from two main parts, biologic and geologic. From the geologic perspective, it is the process by which carbon in gaseous form gets trapped in underground geologic formations. On the other hand, biologic sequestration refers to the storage of atmospheric carbon through vegetation, soils, trees, and aquatic environments. This creates a positive feedback loop, as the more carbon in the air, the more efficient trees will be, compounding this interaction. In Kamiak Butte's case, an experiment was set up to where around 200 acres from each side were examined and carbon and nitrogen samples were taken from trees in the corresponding sides. From all tested tree species, Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, and western larch, around 50% of the sample was carbon. From this, it was deducted that the inner stem and trunk contained about 57% of the carbon, the roots contained 18%, and the foliage held the remaining 5%. Using what we know about carbon sequestration, we can infer that with the rising global CO2 temperatures, there will be irreversible consequences after some time. Without making immediate alterations to how humans influence the environment, many of these features will be permanently changed, and not always for the better. Biodiversity will likely decline in areas that were once diverse, and native animal species will be flushed out of their habitats, and native plant life will be forced to adapt or die. Complex environments like Kamiak depend on consistent natural processes to keep the life thriving, and it becomes at risk due to climate change. Analyzing our environment to reach a deep understanding of how things come to be is an important part of human life and human nature. Not only are these findings beneficial for economic reasons, but scientific reasons as well. If we can grasp the vastly complex ways that our environment, climate, and anthropogenic influences affect the world around us, then we can work on ways to preserve them and pursue a deeper understanding of everything.